Welcome, everyone. It's been 7 long years, but we are finally back to cover the latest season of Daredevil, Daredevil Born Again. And luckily for the long wait, Disney has decided to give us the first 2 episodes for review. And what a bang we started off with this episode, these 2 episodes. With the break between this season coming from Netflix over to Disney, I think it was important to differentiate how this show is going to be different from what we've seen before, even though we're dealing with the same characters. And when I say they started off with a bang, I really didn't think it was going to be a literal bang, with unfortunately Foggy being the one that's dearly departed in the first episode within the first 15 minutes of the show. That was an absolute shocker. And I think it's a good way to let all of us viewers know right off the bat that no one is safe, the stakes are higher, and the consequences are higher for our dear blind superhero, Matt Murdock. So let's get started with how that all came together. The way the episode starts, classic New York scene, kind of a classic New York happy hour in Hell's Kitchen. Everybody's relaxing, the lawyers, the police, everybody's having a good time. So you sense something was going to happen. I was thinking maybe something more aligned to what the Green Goblin did with Aunt May in the original Spider-Man movies in the early 2000s, where he burst through her bedroom. I was thinking something like that might happen, and then we would see Daredevil get into action, but no, it was a complete ambush. We got to see Bullseye in his full lethal splendor. We learned later on that he ended up killing 11 people in this ambush. Not sure why he spared Karen, but I guess we'll find that out later on. But what was so good about this opening scene is kind of the brutality of the fighting that we saw with Daredevil and Bullseye. We got a sneak peek of this, so some of you might have seen it a couple days before this episode aired. But we got a classic hallway fight scene with Daredevil, and it almost looked like a bull and a matador fighting. The bull being Daredevil trying to just smash Bullseye by any means necessary, just full of rage. And we see Bullseye being more of a precision fighter, just slowly trying to break down Daredevil with these precision daggers that he was throwing in him. And at the end of the fight, he looked like a literal pincushion chopped all over. It looked like Bullseye was really trying to maim him more than trying to just neutralize and kill him. So brutal fight. Daredevil tosses Bullseye off the top of the building, and somehow he survives. So this whole thing, I feel like, is going to be kind of a moving motif throughout the rest of the season. The whole idea of how do you deal with vigilantes? What was Bullseye's purpose of this attack? We haven't learned that through the first 2 episodes. And most importantly, how it's changed Matt. Already he's broken and he broke his code. He was trying to kill Bullseye. So we already know that he's willing to cross that line going forward. Is he going to be able to keep that violent nature in check, or is that going to be something that we see him crossing the line over and over throughout the season? And if the Punisher shows up, that's going to be an interesting juxtaposition, juxtaposition, excuse me, between the two, because as we know before, Matt was really the one trying to rein the Punisher in. This time around, it looks like it's going to be the complete opposite. So something to keep in mind as we watch the show. The other thing that really stood out is the probably the most important scene between two characters is seeing Kingpin and Matt have that sit down after Wilson has announced he's running for mayor. He's getting traction, he's getting supporters, and they sit down. Initially, they're trying to be cordial, but there's too much bad history between the two. And they end the conversation with two threats. The threat on Kingpin's part is telling Matt that if you ever put that mask back on, I'm going to come for you and I'm going to destroy everything you have and hold dear. And on the flip side, Matt is telling Wilson that if you're on the up and up and you're really trying to improve this city, I believe in redemption. That's what I was taught. I'm willing to let it go. But if there's any inkling that I see that you're still involved in crime, I'm going to come for you and I'm going to dismantle everything that you've built up, this facade that you have built up in front of you. So we both know that we all know that they're both violent men in their own way. And Wilson brought this up during the conversation about how they're going to deal with their violent natures going forward. Wilson's solution, with these first two episodes, seems to be that I'm going to shroud my violence in a facade of respectability. I'm going to work through the system. I'm going to use my ruthlessness in business and on the streets to be successful in the political world and to insulate myself. Matt hasn't figured out yet what he's going to do with Karen being gone, with Foggy being dead, even though justice was served. We still don't know the motivation for what Bullseye did and or who ordered it. And then also what's going to be Matt's line going forward. For now, he seems to be wanting to work through the courts and work through the system. But what happens when that doesn't work? And we've already seen that not working because with Bullseye locked up and Wilson seeming to be engulfed in politics for the moment, the main adversary that Matt is dealing with now is the biggest gang in New York, which is the NYPD, and dealing with corruption. He's already had to take out two cops, and it looks like he's killed them, now that he's representing the White Tiger and trying to get him off from a vigilante. Well, I won't even call it a vigilante killing. He was a good Samaritan killing. He was saving that person from being brutalized by two corrupt cops. But, the NYPD always sides with themselves. And now he's made an enemy on two fronts. If Daredevil shows back up, the NYPD is going to be at his head. And even just him as Matt the lawyer, everyone in the NYPD despises him because they feel like he's defending a cop killer. And that extends to his firm as well. Uh, Matt isn't really giving himself a lot of grace because he had no choice but to kill those two cops. They literally beat him and were trying to kill him after they found him in the victim's apartment. So he really didn't have a choice, but we know he's not going to see it that way. This is the third time he's had to cross the line in just two episodes as far as killing people. Oh, well, two, because Bullseye survived, but still crossing that line and having that murderous intent. And he's struggling to deal with that. So it's funny because it seems like, as you see from the picture behind me, they're two sides of the same coin, him and Kingpin. And Kingpin is right now being able to keep his rage in check to a degree. And Matt, on the opposite end, has not been able to. He's continually finding himself in situations where his rage is taking over and he's crossing his moral code. So where that goes going forward is going to be real interesting to see when other characters hopefully show up. Hopefully Karen comes back. Maybe we get some Punisher cameos. I doubt Spider-Man shows up because that's a movie property, but Spider-Man was mentioned, as Kingpin talked about in, I believe, Ep.1-2, that we have to get these vigilantes under control. He mentioned Daredevil, mentioned Punisher, and mentioned Spider-Man. So we'll see where that goes. You know what? Maybe I'm not going to rule out Spider-Man because Matt did show up in Homecoming. So maybe we, get a Spider-Man cameo. So we shall see on that front. As far as the first episode goes, also there was a lot of beautiful shots that I enjoyed in this episode. The first one was after Foggy's death, when Matt was preparing for the funeral. We see a jump shot where Matt goes to grab or put down Foggy's obituary, and then the shot jumps to Kingpin sitting down having a luxurious meal. It kind of shows you where they're at this point, where Matt is engulfed in despair. Kingpin is surrounded by the air of respectability, even after being humiliated, being defeated by Matt at the end of the original show, and being imprisoned. Now all of that money has taken all of that humiliation away for the time being, and Kingpin is now back in control for at least for the time being. The second shot was after Kingpin won the actual mayoral seat, and his campaign is celebrating in the office. Everything is in slow motion, and we see Wilson and Vanessa locking eyes. And the reason why I love that scene so much is that despite all that celebration, despite doing things quote unquote the right way, they're the only two people in that office that knows their true natures, knows where the skeletons are buried, knows all the crime that they're still committing and all the money that they're generating from that, from Vanessa's work. They're the only two that know. So I thought that was a really poignant scene between the two characters. And then the last scene would be the closing of episode one, where Matt is going through the city. The city's in turmoil to a degree because it's divided. Some people hate Wilson Fisk, and the other half love him, feel like he's the only one that can clean up the city. And so we have Wilson looking down on the city, looking down on his new income, knowing that he has the power to do things the criminal way and the legal way, and he's almost completely insulated at this point. And then you have Daredevil down in the muck of it, down in the streets, looking up at the power that he has to take down, which is Wilson Fisk. But how does he do it? Right now he has no power or way to do it at this point. So seeing where the two characters are at to start the season, I thought that was a really important scene. And I'm assuming somehow in the later half of the season it's going to be flipped, where Kingpin is going to be somehow taken down a notch and back on the streets, or his facade is going to be exposed. And then Daredevil is going to be the one overlooking the city as the man without fear, the protector of Hell's Kitchen, and by extension, the rest of New York. So looking forward to seeing how those shots potentially flip as the season goes on. As far as anything I didn't like, I'm still on the fence about this whole kind of thing with Heather. Not so much the romance between the Heather character and Matt. I'm not really big on this whole Dr. Melfi thing. For those of you who watch The Sopranos, her being the therapist now for Wilson and Vanessa. I feel like we've gone down that road with The Sopranos, and I don't think it can be done any better than how The Sopranos did it. So I'd rather them not go down that route. And it makes things a little too muddled to me. But we'll see how it goes. We're talking about Vanessa's character and Wilson Fisk. They've been money on the screen so far. Between these two episodes, I have been loving the majority of their scenes together, particularly knowing that Vanessa is the only one that kind of has the power to keep Wilson at bay. I mean, she's had an affair. Wilson said he knows about it, and she was able to tell him that, promise me you're not going to do anything to Adam, and he pretty much agreed to it. And she's been the one that's been holding down the criminal side while he's been locked up. Just to get an idea of how powerful she is at this point, the fact that she's able to call a meeting with the five mafia families, have them all show up, and have them listen to, as misogynist as that group can be, listen to the authority of a woman and not have any pushback, shows you where her status is at this point. To a degree, she might be even more powerful than Wilson, being that Wilson has been gone for so long. So Vanessa is a very strong adversary, and I'm interested to see once she starts getting involved in trying to handle Daredevil, how that goes, that back and forth between them. Because I think to a degree, she's a little bit more dangerous than Wilson is, because she has that control that he doesn't have. Speaking of Kingpin, I've been loving, he's been doing this for the entire show, but his hand motions, you can just kind of the fidgeting that he does with his hands, that to me symbolizes that rage that he's always trying to keep in check. He's always trying to keep that mask on. So just seeing how Vincent D'Onofrio continues to play that throughout both episodes was awesome to see. You really see it on display when he's having to sit down with Matt in episode one at the diner. Another instance of that where we got to see that mask that he keeps up is with the BB character, BB Ulrich, who's Ben's relative. When she mentions that she's related to Ben, you see Wilson not miss a beat. Even though he killed Ben brutally with his bare hands, he doesn't let any of that mask drop when he realizes that he's sitting in front of potentially the daughter of Ben. Or no, but we know there's some type of kin to each other. But he realizes immediately the importance of using the press going forward. And I like what they've done to kind of break up the episodes. It kind of reminds me a little bit of some of that word on the street motifs that we saw in the Luke Cage series, where the BB report kind of goes back to that 80s and 90s kind of gritty presentation where we're hearing from regular New Yorkers about everything that's going on in the episodes. What do they feel about Daredevil? What do they feel about the police? Do they trust the police? Do they trust Wilson going forward as mayor? So that is always kind of the pulse of the hidden main character of the show, which I think is the city of New York in general. So I think that's a good way to kind of keep the city city's pulse engaged throughout the remaining episodes. As far as questions that I still have remaining after these first two episodes, it would be number one, who hired Bullseye? We know he's not going to stay locked up. So just getting more screen time with him, what's going on in his mindset, why he spared Karen, because he had a clean shot at Karen. I don't know if he wanted her to suffer or not. Why particularly did Foggy have to die? Um, that might have been addressed in season three. It has been a while since I watched that of the Netflix series. So if I'm missing something, please let me know because I really think he looked like he was really after Foggy and no one else. Um, Also, what's going to cause Wilson's facade to fall? We're assuming it's going to be something that Daredevil does. It seemed like the police commissioner who was about to resign was close to getting Wilson to drop that mask, but Wilson was already 200 steps ahead, knew about his illegitimate child, so that wrapped all that up very quickly. But somebody's going to needle him a little too much. It might be the BB character, because if she finds out that Kingpin was behind Ben being killed, that's going to totally flip her coverage. Right now she's just young and wanting to get as much access as possible for her show. So she has that tunnel vision, and she's using the Daniel Blake character, ironically James Gandolfini's son. We were talking about The Sopranos earlier, to try and get that inroads with the Kingpin. So we'll see how far she's willing to go just to get access and what she discovers. I'm assuming what she discovers isn't what she is going to, really appreciate. So I'm expecting her, outside of Matt, to might be the one that exposes the true nature of Kingpin while he's in office. Um, Also, this whole broken Daredevil thing that we have going on, he has two bodies in just two episodes, and I think it was really symbolized by his scream at the end of episode two. His glasses are broken from the fight that he had with the corrupt cops, and I think he's slowly starting to realize that he's unraveling. He doesn't have his core people with him anymore. Yes, he has uh, Kirsten McDuffie, with the new lawyer association. He has Cherry also, but they're not Karen and Foggy, who have been with him since the beginning. They're gone. Foggy is not coming back. Karen is estranged from him. He doesn't have his core people with him anymore to ground him while he's going through these moments. So it feels like he's being forced back into Daredevil, but it's not the Daredevil that we know. It's almost Punisher-like, where he's not as murderous as the Punisher, but he's willing to cross that line when it needs to be done. And he's seeming to do it easier and easier. There was a little hesitation and I think a little bit more anguish when he tried to kill Bullseye. But with the two cops, no, he was all in on that, even after he screamed afterward. I think he was justified because they were trying to kill him. But I think he is slowly becoming more like the Punisher than he wants to be. And that's without the Punisher showing up. So how is this going to be cleaned up in episodes 3 and 4? Because these are two more dead cops. The NYPD is going to be on a rampage now because now they have three dead cops with no retribution. They know it's not the White Tiger character because he's in custody. So it's either Daredevil or Punisher. So they're going to be after all the vigilantes in the city. And I liked how they're playing this because it almost reminds me of the Watchmen series, the HBO series and also the movie series, where we're seeing how damaged these vigilante characters are. They're all estranged in their personal life, except for maybe Spider-Man to a degree, but everyone else, they can't keep anyone close to them in this line of business. It slowly just rips away at your personal relationships. So we'll see where that goes. Also, the Daniel Blake character, played by James Gandolfini's son, he's already kind of wiggled his way close to Wilson Fisk. And I'm wondering if Wilson is going to start trusting him with more underhanded type of stuff, because we know Daniel's willing to do almost anything. And he's a very good lackey so far, but he has the youth vote with him. And I want to see how uh, the Kingpin is going to be willing to manipulate that. If not him, maybe it'll be Vanessa. And speaking of Vanessa, out of all the characters so far in these first two episodes, her aura, the way she carries herself, has been number one. She moves like a true boss. And I want to see her get a lot more scenes and hopefully do a lot more stuff independent of Wilson in the next couple episodes, or at least the last half of this season. But that is my recap and review for episodes 1 and 2. Only thing I wasn't really crazy about would be the whole therapy storyline with Heather and also the romance storyline with that. I just feel like it's not a bad storyline, but compared to everything else that's going on, it feels like scenes that I'm not really going to be as invested in. So, but let me know what you guys think about that. And I'll be back next week to cover episode 3. We'll be trying to cover and list my reviews probably the same night after each episode airs, or if not, first thing the following morning, depending on how the rollout is with the episodes from Disney. But thank you for your time. Looking forward to seeing you next week. And let me know what you think about the episodes.